And right now we have another panelist. This is our second panel, is Ethel Long Scott of the Women's Economic Agenda Project.
Honored to join the earlier speakers. I think one of the things we can certainly say is that we actually are living at a very interesting and pivotal time. Probably in this audience and your listeners are not going to be too surprised that while we had an important march that celebrated a 50-year anniversary, we also know that there was actually an absence of discussion about precisely the growing attack on democracy, the growing attack on workers' rights, the growing encroachment on our very being and existence. And as we speak today, our president has uttered yet another potential threat for launching war. At this point, it's really clear that what we do really, really matters. That we're in the battle for the fight for humanity's existence, really our planet. Now, I know sometimes people will say, well, that's hyperbole. You know, there goes that radical woman running off at the mouth. I'll take that. But I also think that's about a different vision and about some different values. And really, I think when you examine that march and you examine what came prior to that march, when the murderer of Trayvon Martin was exonerated, people across this nation hit the streets, including the cities and communities here in the Bay Area. And they weren't about trying to simply beg about, give us justice. But if you look at, just as one example, the Dream Defenders, who have been doing an excellent job from pivoting from immigration rights to taking over the governor's mansion and having a 24/7 protest, not simply around the notion that this murderer needs to be, that pressure needs to be rescinded, but that the whole stand your ground and fascist motion needs to be changed. These young people aren't begging for something else. They're not talking about fight back. They're really talking about a vision for a different world that they understand they have to craft. So I want to put my comments in the context of why I think this kind of mini strikes that we've been, a strike wave that we've been involved in, what is their significance at this time, and maybe why the period that we're living in. I'd say that one of the things we got to really recognize, and different speakers have really touched on it, is that we are actually really living in a period of this tremendous change from laborless production and what's from automated production to laborless production, and what that's going to mean for us. We've got many of the things that people describe, the destruction of the safety net, the destruction of work and the workers in them, and the growing measure to say, if you're going to get something, it's going to be for far less. I mean, all of these are to serve these corporations that are global monsters across this globe. And we do not have a responsive vision and plan forward. What it seems to me, the significance of these strikes that have happened is that they represent, even if they're at their very beginning, the notion that, you know what, your proposal for austerity, we reject that. We reject that. And you know something further? We understand that you're making this money on our backs. Just yesterday, some of the least represented and poorest workers in our nation took a day to strike, not just because, they're striking for quote unquote $15 an hour. Now, we used to put that in the old part of the workers' effort as a part of a fight for living wage. And these workers these are not just teenagers. These are whole families that sometimes live in homelessness, some oftentimes go without health care, oftentimes are under the worst conditions, understand that they need to have a better ability to collectively organize. What I think that we're really seeing is the beginnings of something that many of us have really understood we needed, and that is a new solidarity movement. And a solidarity movement that is actually based on the values of bringing that bottom up, but not simply that, but of really looking at that we need kind of simultaneously two things: economic democracy and political democracy. Now, in this country, we've been trained to think about we have political democracy, even though unless you were quite privileged and often male and often white, you didn't really have those things. But we've never been promised economic democracy. And what do I mean by that? I mean the ability to determine, have the control over our economic sustainability and resources. Okay, now we're up in the game. Different kind of conversation. Ain't about that begging game. It's all about there's the resources, phenomenal abundance in this country that we could take care of our people and in fact the planet. The kind of measures that the transit workers have faced is what's gone on in Greece, what's gone on in Italy, what's gone on in Spain. This is not isolated events. I think that we don't serve ourselves simply by beating up on one another of who hasn't done what. It's kind of a new day. We got new leaders who don't even know about them fights that we're talking about. They're looking at the reality that voting rights have been rescinded. And they may not know all the aspects of what it was supposed to do, but they understand you're talking about rolling back even the most minimum protections of the democracy here. So I think we need to understand that we're actually living in a different social period. How do we begin to build a new kind of unity on the basis of all of us needing to come up, and that it is going to mean those who are unemployed as well as employed. Actually, for some of us understanding, it's a new class of dispossessed that has actually been created, being created, and we're going to have to craft a new social contract that talks about how we might get goods and services to human beings who have not a penny in their pocket. And they're not just in some foreign country. They're right here. They're right here. So I think that the value of these struggles is that they represent a class beginning to straighten its back and beginning to understand that we may be from different strata, but we need a unified strategy, program, and plan. It's not all together yet. We're going to have to build that unity. But I think that's what this gives us the beginnings of. And I think that's from that standpoint that we see this question of the beginnings of fleshing out the details of what is economic democracy. That's the big umbrella. I don't think we have to give kudos to one group or the other, but I am going to applaud and say we have to have solidarity with the men and women who put their livelihood, their families, and themselves on the line first. Now we got to educate the rest of our class about how this kicks open the door for all of our justice.